Someone's digging up Bruce's past. Here's your look at the new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, Batman vs. Hush. Young Tommy Elliott was a childhood friend of Wayne, who also grew up in wealth and privilege. However, Tommy soon became deeply jealous and resented Bruce once his parents were tragically killed. Seeing Bruce as getting the independence and wealth Tommy so desperately desired, eventually becoming a surgeon, Tommy's resentment for Bruce continued to fester and grow over the years. When the Riddler discovered that Bruce is really Batman, he approached Dr. Elliott with the secret. But when the two realized they shared a hatred for Wayne, they joined forces, wrapping his face in bandages to hide his identity. Elliott manipulated many of Batman's greatest supervillains in a grand conspiracy to defeat him. Hence, he was chosen the identity of Hush. I already know that there's going to be a lot that I'm going to want to talk about for both Batman and Hush. And of course, we'll get to that in a second. First, though, I'm sure you guys would be curious to know how tall these figures stand. Happy to oblige with that. Batman is going to be taller of the two figures. He's actually 7 inches in height, or to spin that around. The figure's about 17.5 centimeters tall, or about 18 centimeters tall when you include his ears. Not his ears, the ears of the cowl. Hush is actually just a little bit shorter than Batman, as you probably already can see. The figure's 6.5 inches in height, or he's about 16.5 centimeters tall. This 2-pack gives you 2 ways of actually displaying the figures. You can display them standalone on their own dedicated display stands, or there's a rather interesting display stand that also comes included with both the figures that you can have them standing together. Not the most successful, though, mind you. First, though, if you want to have them independently standing, both the figures of Batman and Hush, grabbing their corresponding display stands, come with the same black DC logo stands that we've seen already countless times before. Sorry, what? Oh, right. Psst. DC logo sizzled down below, and one, of course, singular peg up the top corner. That's going to attach the undersides of both the figures' feet. Separately, not together. Both the figures also come included with their trading cards. This is Batman's, and grabbing Hush's here. And stating already the obvious, yes, they are using figure photography, but I gotta say, to the points, though, credited to McFarlane's team, I do like the way they've colored these. So almost from, like, a glance, if you were to just quickly look at it and then look away for a second, they almost look like they're CG models and not necessarily the characters, not necessarily figures. One thing, the rather interesting thing to note is that you can see that Hush is wearing a trench coat that's brown. And yet, looking at him, his trench coat looks like it's more of a spicy yellow mustard. Spicy yellow mustard. On the back, of the 2 read-ups, I would say probably Hush wins it for the most read-up. He's the meteor of the 2 read-ups, and I didn't actually read Batman's simply just because it's the same Batman read-up we've gotten countless times before. Rather interesting also to point out is the way they've painted off Batman's gloves. Remember that, because we're going to talk about that. We're going to put those to the side. As I did say, though, the figures also come included with a display stand that did involve a little bit of assembly, not that much. You literally just take the tombstone of Jason Todd and you plank it inside the terrain here. What was surprising about this is it's not solid plastic. 2 halves of hollow plastic were adhered together, and you actually get yourself a hollowed tombstone. I don't really know why they wouldn't have just used a solid plastic. I mean, from a mold standpoint, would they have not had to produce 2 separate molds and sandwich them together? Or is it just a case where they actually put a piece inside the mold and they basically just shell mold over top of it? That's probably one of the reasons why it's hollow. Maybe just using a little bit of less plastic to produce it. Anyways, you got the Here Lies Jason Todd here on the front. I do like it. It doesn't fit the easiest, mind you, into the actual terrain. Literally, like, again, you're just pinching it, plugging it in, putting actually a fair bit of pressure on it to get that to stay in place. As for this terrain, in the past, when we have looked at 2-pack DC Multiverse figures, they generally do come with a display stand like this. Not necessarily looking like this, but something where you can actually have both figures displayed on it. The thing about it, though, is while it's nicely detailed, you can see the terrain done here. It's not only done in just a dark gray, but actually they've gone and painted what almost looks to be like a lighter tanned brown over top of it. So it does have something interesting. It almost kind of looks like there's a lamp light or some outside light, maybe a moonlight even shining down on it. That looks good. The thing about it, though, is there doesn't seem to be a proper place that I can figure out where these figures are supposed to go. If you did want to have them displayed together, I'm just going to put them down, move these figures out of the way here for a second. If you did want to have them displayed, let's also move the batarang and the shovel out of the way. If you did want to have them displayed, if you say were to plug Batman on this side, and then you were to say take Hush and plug him on this side, it doesn't seem like the things line up that way. The way they've got the one footprint, as you can see, squishing down the mud, leads me to believe that then they have the plan of having like a Batman figure or a Hush figure plugged in like this, where Batman's foot is only plugged in on the one side, and then you're sort of just bending the foot. Now, looking at this right now, that looks absolutely ridiculous. Again, like the way they put the peg right here, and they've got the footprint going this direction, sort of leads me to believe that you would want to widen the stance of whatever figure you decide to put in there. Then there's also a secondary peg right here, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like for me, displaying these figures, I'm going to put the displays down here for a second down. As I did at the beginning of this review, I would almost really want to put Batman like right here, and I'd almost want to put like Hush right there. But like the pegs don't line up with my configuration. Granted, my configuration would be completely wrong also as well. For me, I would have actually taken this peg and I would have moved it over here and maybe put another one right here for Batman. Again, like it's this footprint that I feel is really throwing everything off for me because I don't think it really lines up properly. You could technically take Hush's foot and line it up this way and bring his other foot backwards, but already you can see his trench coat is draping over the tombstone. And I can't imagine that that would be right either. I think for me, when it comes just to displaying these guys, I would be more inclined, I think, just to display the diorama, the scene behind the figures, and then just simply put them on the shelf like this, with the tombstone of Jason Todd behind it instead. Moving those figures out of the way, let's actually just get that diorama out of the way and putting the figures actually back down here for a second. Batman, I will tell you already, does have difficult times standing, and I think a lot of it has to do with more the molding of his cape. Just to get him as balanced as I possibly can get him. Seeing like he's gonna fall over on me. You know, for the time being, I'm gonna cheat. I mean, that's what the display stands are here for after all. There we go. Let's look at the accessories now, please. Thank you. Batman comes included with 2 bat shurikens, or batarangs. See, I knew he was gonna fall over. In both the cases, they look like they've rather been painted silver instead of actually been molded in silver plastic. They are thick, yes, so they follow, again, the same problem with all of these multiverse figures, that the accessories are way thicker than they need to be. But at least they are nicely painted. These can fit into Batman's hands, because, of course, the hands that he comes with right now are both gripping hands. So easily you can take the batarangs, place them into Batman's hands. Like there's the one. And again, you can do the exact same thing on the other side. Like that. I don't think the likelihood is there that Batman would probably be wielding both batarangs at the very same time, but at least it's there if you wanted to. Hush also comes included with an accessory. Is Batman going to stand this time around? Please let him stand. I'd hate to think I have to keep balancing. He's going to fall over. For the time being, though, Hush comes also included with a shovel. The shovel almost looks as if it's got, like, ground or dirt or something on the end of it. And yet, it's all been painted all the same coloring, so it actually looks like it's more rust on the end of the shovel than actually dirt or mud. Probably would have gone in there, and I think painted that just brown instead. The handle has been nicely sculpted, looking as if it's actually got a wood handle. You can see there's a nice wood grain added to it. And like, for what it is, like the head of the shovel looks good. I just don't know if this is supposed to be the same color as the rest of the head. This can fit into his hand, although he only unfortunately has one hand to hold the shovel. I mean, I guess you could display him like this, but if you are one that likes to dig grave sites, why are we trailing off to people that dig grave sites? If you are, though, I would imagine you're probably digging up graves with both hands. You're not going to single hand shovel ground. I really do wish that the figure could have come to include with a secondary hand, because it seems off and out of place. Why would they not have included a second hand, a gripping hand for Hush to hold the shovel properly? Those are the accessories. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the figures themselves. I'm going to start first with Batman. as he so far seems to be the exclusive to this set. It usually is the case when we look at these 2-packs that one of the figures usually get released on his own or on their own, but they're slightly molded differently. Hush is actually a single release as well, and his head sculpt is different than the one we get right here. Batman, as far as I know, is the exclusive to this set. And what a fine looking Batman it is. It is, though, not without problems, and believe you me, I'm going to state some of the problems in this review. But like stock head sculpt is one of the best, if not the best. Are we dethroning the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh? Possibly. As this might be my favorite Batman we've gotten so far. Now, I didn't think I would have liked Batman with the open mouth like this. From what the image I've seen online of this particular mold, I thought, why would they have molded Batman's mouth open like this, giving him more of a grimaced head sculpt? Now seeing it, though, in hand, and hopefully showing you guys as well as I am, hopefully am in this review, I gotta say, like, the mouth being open doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would be. To at least the credit of McFarlane's team, they've painted the mouth nicely. I mean, you can see, like, the teeth have been sculpted and painted to the point where you can actually make out each of his individual teeth. A tongue is not so much not as easy to see in this, but at least they've sculpted. I think the mouth looks actually better in person than it does when I've seen images online of it. It's a classic looking Jim Lee style of Batman. So you got a very broad, square chin, very squared off head. And of course, he's got the shorter ears, which actually work quite well for this particular figure. I would be certainly curious to see what this head sculpt could look like with a closed mouth. But, honestly, again, seeing it in hand, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. In fact, it's a lot better. His body consists of a standard gray costuming with now black underoos, black cape, black gloves. Yeah, we're going to talk more about that in a second. And a decently sculpted cape. It kind of reminds me of the days of the DC Direct Batman figures where you had like a really long flowing cape that really had some interesting sculpting to it. You can see the waves, you can see the wrinkles. Very nice cape. It is definitely one of the better capes we've gotten for a Batman. But let's, of course, discuss the elephant in the room. The big problem I have with this figure is two things. The biggest one of the two is the fact that clearly you can see they did not paint where the glove stops. Instead, what they've done, I'm guessing, is they just molded the lower forearm, the forearm area here in black plastic. And then to make insult to injury even worse, they've actually used a black peg to use for the elbow, just to kind of show you what it could have looked like, bringing him back in the card. You see, in this case, Batman's glove should have actually been painted right to around here, and all the rest of it should have just been the gray plastic. I don't know why they decided to go the route that they did it. Instead of using the gray plastic, they've used black plastic. There must have been some miscommunication between the company and the factory. The other thing I really have an issue with this figure comes more to his articulation. You would look at this and almost assume that Batman does have head articulation and then his neck is a separate piece, but actually his head and neck are together. Now, I don't know how I really feel about this, because one end, it does give you at least a seamless looking mold. It doesn't limit necessarily his articulation. In fact, you can move it easily, just as much as you could with a Batman that would have had the head articulation. The problem with it, though, is when you do bring his head back, or if you have it out like this, you can really see where the neck is then a separate piece, and of course that's just plugged into the body of his torso. I guess at the end of the day, I'm not as bothered about the neck, because at least it looks like a seamless looking neck to his head. I am more bothered definitely by the gloves, and that would be hard to really overlook. I can't even look at that and say, well, yeah, I could understand Batman's gloves being higher up like this, but then they should have at least used gray plastic for the hinge joint and the elbow, and I'm really disappointed that they didn't. The emblem, as you can see, is raised from the rest of his torso. They didn't simply just paint that in, so that's nice. The utility belt is painted a well-colored, kind of a warmer mustard yellow. And you can see all the individual pockets. This is a believable utility belt. This would be, I would imagine, something that could properly hold a Batarang. Maybe not the T-1000 Batarangs that he comes included with, but I can certainly at least believe that Batman would be able to house something in there. They're not small pockets. As for the rest of his body, I should say, like the lower legs are the same gray plastic as the top of his torso. No problems really with there, because, it is just molded legs. They didn't add necessarily any paint. I don't think they needed to add any additional paint. And like the boots seem like they are painted, as I can't move them around. So why wouldn't they have, if they're going to go and do that for the lower legs, Why couldn't they have done that also for the gloves? Because I feel like the gloves are even more jarring than the lower legs would have been. As you can see, he does have the peg holes on the undersides of his feet. But like this particular Batman, maybe because he does have all the extra weight in his cape, that's causing the figure to have some stability issues. For the figure's articulation, though, we've already discussed the fact that his neck is going to be one piece along with his head. So together, collectively, they rotate all the way around. He can look down, he can look up, and you can also rock the head back and forth. Shoulders come out. A little loose on my figure. They also do rotate all the way around. Figure does have a bicep swivel, a double hinge. I mean, even look at that. Oh, it stands out. Why couldn't that have just been gray plastic? Double hinge, though, on the elbow. Hands rotate all the way around. They hinge also back and forth. Batman does have an upper torso ball joint. Batman also does have a lower torso ball joint that's just below the utility belt. This section right here is a softer plastic that they did use to conceal over the joints of his legs. The legs have a ratcheted joint. You hinge those out. You can bring them, of course, forward and back also as well. Figure does have a swivel at the top of his thigh, a double hinge on his knee. No articulation. Again, I was surprised that that wasn't a separate piece, leading me more to believe that this was actually painted in. And the figure does have ankle articulation. A little loose when it moves back and forth, and he does have toe articulation. But for me, at least, I've had a real tough time getting Batman to stand. Again, I can fix that. Certainly, I can fix that issue by just using the display stand. That's what it's there after all for. You know, I'm just going to bring it in. Plug that onto the underside of Batman's feet. Let's hope that stabilizes the figure as well. Like, again, I don't understand why this Batman, of all the Batmans I've looked at already here on this channel, that he's the one that would already be already my favorite of the Batman figures that we've gotten from McFarlane's team. It has to, of course, be the one that has problems with his gloves not being properly painted, and it happens to also be the same issue where the figure has some difficult time standing. You may have a better time getting this figure to stand, but I've noticed even like getting prior to this video shooting, I really had Batman having a tough time standing. It seems to even still be the case now. On to now Hush. Let's go ahead and pick the figure up right now, and I guess for the sake of looking at him, let's just slide out the shovel from his hand and put that to the side. Now, this figure is going to be one that is available on its own, or available, obviously, in this 2-pack. The differences, though, are there, so it's not simply just a case that they're just repacking the exact same Hush. The single-released Hush, which we will be looking at in an upcoming review, does actually have a closed mouth, or it shows more grimaced teeth. It doesn't have the yelling face that this one has here. It's a nice-looking head sculpt, but I got to admit, this standalone Hush, I think, is the better of the two figures. I do like the way they've sculpted the bandages and the coloring that they decided to go with as well, as it seems to be slightly a purple tinted gray. I think it's a nicely sculpted head sculpt. Still, though, I think I like the standalone Hush just a little bit more. He does have the necklace inside, and then, of course, over top of that, a softer plastic torso piece, which basically is just his trench coat. The trench coat, from what I can see, seems to be the same as the singular release. The coloring is also the same, but the only notable difference is the coloring of his gloves. I believe the standalone Hush would have had purple gloves, where this one has more a brown-colored glove. I don't think that there's anything different between the two, but of course, when we do have a look at that standalone Hush, comparisons will be made between the two. Being that this is softer plastic, it also won't limit the figure's articulation when it comes to moving the legs around. Yeah, they are going to be a little more tied up because, of course, he's got the plastic over top of it. But at least they, first of all, put a split in the front of the trench coat, and they've done the exact same thing on the back, where it also gives me an opportunity to show you guys the sculpting on the inside. Now, it doesn't look like they've added any little bit of paint, but at least what paint they haven't put on, they've made more than up for the fact they actually did put some decent sculpting there on the pants, the boots, you can see there as well. Also, even like on the boots, there's like these chips and like parts that look almost damaged. I like that they actually did do that. They did also sculpt laces there also on his footwear. Articulation, we'll talk about articulation in a second. They've also sculpted the under treads of his boots. Like I said, it's a good looking figure. I just think I like the standalone Hush, or will like the standalone Hush just a little bit more. And again, like going back to his trading card, the coloring obviously is wrong. I think that they may have digitally altered the face because the face does seem a little bit wider than the actual Hush that we have here in the plastic figure. Of course, the coloring of the trench coat is a much darker brown. I think based on the comics, it's closer to being like this coloring, maybe just a shade darker, but I didn't think they changed too much of the coloring of the costuming. I think it's about close enough to what we get for the figure. Articulation here on Hush, pretty much the same as Batman, really. The head does have a hinge, that a ball joint that allows the head to look up, allows the head to look down. And actually along those, you actually have in between all the additional articulation points that one would expect for a dumbbell ball joint. A lot of articulation on this guy. Shoulders, again, like the Batman, do come out, although with Hush, I think you get a greater range of motion. You can take the arms and rotate them again all the way around. The bicep does have a swivel cut, so yeah, you can rotate the torso, or what am I talking about here, the elbow, all the way around. Figure does have speaking of elbow, a double bend in the elbow there. Just get the hinge joint to rotate. There we go, properly. Now, again, like this is soft plastic. Sort of you can feel like there's something working behind the scenes when it comes to his upper torso ball joint. Like you can move it, but of course, any little bit of movement that you're going to do still doesn't really look like you've done all that much anything anyways, because of course he does have the plastic trench coat over top of it. Again, like the legs split out, at least they did put the cut in the front of the trench coat, and again, they did it on the back there as well. So, you know, again, like you can do a splits on Hush if you want to properly line up to that display stand. Why did they have to put the pegs in such awkward places on that display stand? Anyways, you can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. There is if you can get in there, mind you, there's a swivel at the top of the thigh. Double hinge joint on the knee. There is no articulation here, although it kind of looks like there's a cut right there. There actually isn't. It's just part of the sculpting. And again, like when it comes to the ankles, you can move them back and forth, and ankle pivot with toe articulation as well. Part of me almost even thinks like this set could have easily been released singular. I mean, for the fact that we already have a Hush being released on his own, I feel like they could have also followed suit with Batman. It didn't necessarily need, I think, a 2-pack like this. Granted, yes, Hush is a different figure, different colored gloves, and completely different sculpted head sculpt. But again, like, I don't know if I would have necessarily said, like, this set needed to be picked up if a standalone Batman was already going to be released and a standalone Hush was getting released, which it was. I don't know if they necessarily needed to release this 2-pack again. Now, this has happened before. We have gotten it with, like, Flash, for example. We've gotten it with a Superman and Destroyer 2-pack, where at least if you are getting a standalone figure of these, in either one of these characters, you're not getting a carbon copy yet again in a 2-pack. I do wish, though, at some point we do get ourselves this Batman again, not for the sake of just getting another Batman, but just also for the fact that this Batman could have had a head sculpt with maybe a closed mouth. That's something that they could do with a singular release. And of course, we can't overlook the fact that this Batman has problems with his forearms. Something that I think a singular release of this Batman could fix. Because like Batman shouldn't have his arms plastic like this in black. And certainly putting the joints in his elbows of the same black plastic. You notice it even more so that it almost looks like the arms are wrong. Or they may have used it's almost as if they used a different figure's arms, replacing it out for Batman. This is what Batman should really look like, not what we get here in the actual release. Possibly making matters even worse when it comes to Batman standing properly. One thing I strangely noticed about the undersides of Batman's boots is that the peg-hole that normally would securely attach to the display stand seem larger than the actual peg post. Normally, it's the case whenever you get a DC Multiverse figure, you can easily take a display stand and securely attach it to the under heel of whatever character it is. But in the case of Batman, it doesn't seem so much that he attaches to the display stand, rather than you're actually just putting him on top of the post. And the post is kind of keeping him a little bit more stable than if he was on his own. Believe you me, that's the least of Batman's problems. The greater one being, and it's not even so much either his neck either. I've come to terms with the fact that his head is attached to his neck, and at least to its credit, it gives him a more seamless look. I believe they have done this before with another Batman in the past, that it doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would have. No, the bigger problem, the bigger elephant in the room, is the fact that Batman does have full forearms of black plastic. And to even add further insult to injury, they did also not only add a peg or the hinge joint for the elbow, but they also put the back of the elbow in the same black plastic. It's hard to even overlook the fact that that was an error in the factory. It almost seems like it was a decision that they made, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, when we look at the trading card, not that the trading card should be the bar that it gets measured against, but even like in the trading card, they painted the gloves successfully. And I can't even imagine it's just my Batman figure either. If you have picked up this 2-pack of Batman and Hush, let me know in the comment section if you've also had the same issue with Batman having those forearms in black. Now, again, they already have this mold in their inventory. I would imagine they're going to probably want to get most mileage out of this as possible, whether this figure gets re-released under the gold label or they've released the figure again somehow as a battle damaged Batman. At some point, I'm certain, McFarlane's team will be re-releasing this Jim Lee style Batman. And if that's the case, I hope they fix the biggest issue with this Batman. It's not the peg holes on the undersides of his feet. It's not the fact that the head is attached to his neck. It's the fact that he does have forearms in black with a hinge joint in black and elbows in black. That didn't need to be the case at all. As for Hush, I don't really have any issues necessarily with Hush, just more so the fact that he gets released the exact same time as a single release of Hush. And I think, honestly, the single release of Hush is the better of the two figures. Notably, the single released Hush, by the way, doesn't come included with a shovel. So if you're really adamant about getting a figure that has a shovel, you're going to have to get this 2-pack for obviously because of the Batman also as well. But the single released Hush also comes included with 2 knives, 2 long blade weapons. And his gloves, of course, are purple, and of course he's got a different head sculpt too. So at least if you're getting the Hush on his own, you're not feeling like you're getting the exact same figure again. What do you guys think of this set? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if you have picked up this set already, let me know if you've had the same issues with Batman's forearms being black. Because I can't imagine it's just solely on the figure that I picked up, which I did buy online. So it's not a case where I'd be able to go into a store and see in person, in sight, whether I would be able to say, okay, well, this Batman has a problem with his arms, this one doesn't. I'll pick up the one that obviously doesn't have that problem. I gotta imagine it's going to be across the board. But if you have picked up this set, let me know if you've had the same similar issues with Batman's forearms being all black like this. If you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing and you haven't already done so, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. Turn the bell notification on so you're going to get those reminders every single time a new video is going to be popping up. And speaking of popping up, at the very end of this video, popping up will be a playlist of all the other DC Multiverse figures that I've looked at up to this point and moving forward as well. Will be all in that playlist. We're going to have a lot of other videos, of course, coming away, and of course, some other DC Multiverse reviews coming away also. So make sure you're always coming back to this channel on a regular basis. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.